And just like that, there I am. Poof, I appeared like magic, you would say. So welcome back, my spooky sparkles of doom, to the land the time forgot. The Dead Hours presents The Murder Corner. I am your local skinwalking anachronism and the future ghost with the most, Vivian Noir. And this week, well, have I got an intense episode for you. You thought it got intense last week. Oh, we were about to knock the scale up another couple notches. So many of you may remember watching the fallout of this particular event on television, on live news, as either a child, a teenager, or even an adult. But what the news media covered from the situation and the information that came out of the fiery end of the siege was only like really one fraction of the story. It's only like one facet to this whole like ball of wax. Balls don't really have facets, but you know what? We're going to go with the metaphor anyways. It's a story that continues to be on the news even today. In fact, the Waco situation has popped back into current affairs because one of the current nominees for the head of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was in fact an agent, an active agent at the time of both the Ruby Ridge incident and the Waco siege. And as you can imagine, that's kind of made some sensational headlines. So why won't the story die out? Well, let's get into it and find out. Also, welcome to the dregs of my liquor cabinet because I am out of whiskey. It's okay. It's not my favorite. We'll make it work. So let's get into it, shall we? 5:50 a.m., Monday, April 19th, 1993. Federal agents call into the compound in Waco, Texas. After a fruitless 51-day-long siege going back and forth with the Davidians and their raving leader, David Koresh, it was apparent that the government had gotten tired of waiting. They warned whoever answered the phone that an imminent tear gas assault was underway and for anyone inside to, quote, take cover. Agents claim that whoever answered the phone inside the compound did not respond, but threw the phone to the side. 5:55 a.m. The FBI hostage rescue team deploys 2 armored CEVs to the building. One goes left, the other goes right. 6:00 a.m. FBI surveillance tapes captured from recording devices planted in the compound walls record an unidentified man say, quote, "Everybody wake up, let's start to pray." They also claim to have recorded this interaction. "Pablo, have you poured it yet? Huh? Have you poured it yet? In the hallway. Things are poured, right?" CEV-1 receives orders at this time to spray 2 bottles of tear gas into the left corner of the building. This was how it all began to end that Monday morning. But the events of that day had stretched back even further than the 50-some day-long raid of the controversial, highly polarizing religious group in Waco, Texas, who became known by their ecclesiastical name, the Branch Davidians. They stretched back further than the birth of their wild-eyed, paranoid leader, David Koresh, all the way back to the foundations of the group itself in 1955. To fully understand the events of that tragic afternoon, we have to dive deep into the roots and origins of the group itself, an offshoot of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. Adventists, as a denomination, believe in the imminent second return of Christ. They also observe Saturday as the Sabbath, or holy day of rest, like those of the Jewish faith. In 1929, Victor Hotef, a Bulgarian immigrant and Seventh-day Adventist Sunday school teacher, announced proudly that he had a message for the entire Adventist church. Not the entire church. Speaking of, first of all, this episode was an editing, This was a tough one to edit. So there's that. Secondly, I also had to dive deep into the bag for Bible quotes and religious doctrine, which, as any of you who know me, I don't really like to do. But it's good to know that that religious high school education did come to pay off at some juncture. So there's that. Continue, me. He presented the message in a book called The Shepherd's Rod, but it was not well received, and church leadership rejected Hotef's views as contrary to the church's fundamental core beliefs. Local churches then disfellowshipped Hotef and his followers, leaving them on their own. In 1934, Hotef established the headquarters of his new branch of Adventism to the west of Waco, Texas, and the group became known as Davidians. This name stemmed from their belief in the restoration of the Davidic Kingdom of Israel. After Hotef's death in 1955, his wife Florence continued to lead the group. Convinced of an apocalypse looming on the horizon that would occur in 1959, a date which is not found at all in her husband's original writings, Florence and her council gathered hundreds of faithful followers at the Mount Carmel Center, the fated compound near Waco, for the fulfillment of the prophecy written in Ezekiel 9. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of men, that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Utterly slay old and young men, maidens and little children and women, but do not come near anyone on whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were before the temple. Ezekiel 9, verses 4 and 6. 6:05 a.m. An armored vehicle equipped with a battering ram and a tear gas delivery device breaches the front wall just left of the main door, leaving an 8 by 10 foot hole. Federal agents claimed that such a hole allowed for easier delivery of the gas ordinance, as well as providing a, quote, means for escape. They claim at this time to also see shots fired from inside the compound, directed at the CEVs. 6:10 a.m. FBI surveillance tapes record someone saying, "Don't pour it all out, we might need some later," and "throw the tear gas back out." FBI negotiator Byron Sage is recorded saying, quote, "It's time for people to come out," unquote. Surveillance tapes record a man saying, "What?" and then, "No way." 6:12 a.m. FBI surveillance tapes record the Branch Davidians inside the compound saying, "They're gonna kill us," followed by, "They don't want to kill us." Of course, these apocalyptic events, as promised by Florence, did not occur. Following this disappointment, the group foundered and nearly disappeared. At this time, one of the members of the movement, Benjamin Roden, claimed to have been tasked with delivering a divine message to Florence Hotef and the Executive Council, but was hesitant to do so. Because of this hesitance, he claimed to have been shaken awake at night and lifted out of bed by, quote, the Lord himself, and made to write a letter that outlined the message. When he was... Hang on. Can you imagine? Can you just stay with me in this headspace for a moment? Can we all picture together this man sleeping peacefully in his bed, in his jammies, in his Jimmy Jam jammies, as it were, and he is yanked out of bed and held upside down by who? Not burglars, not home invaders, not even the under the bed demon. No, he is yanked out of his peaceful slumber by the Lord and held upside down and said, "I need you to write a letter." He was just held for ransom. Like, the Lord just made this man write a ransom note, according to him. Wow. Sleep paralysis demon has nothing on this one. Apparently, yeah, the Lord is just supposed to splash you with water until you'd get the fuck up at 2 a.m. and stop gold bricking. Jesus, he runs a tight ship. Yikes. Continue me.
Finished, he said he told God, "These are not my words. I cannot sign this." To which God responded to sign it by Christ's new name, the Branch. And thus, the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist sect was born, led by Benjamin Roden and his wife Lois. The Seventh-day Adventist part was eventually dropped from the name, and they would refer to themselves simply as Branch Davidians or the Branch. This also refers to the anointed branch in Zechariah 3, verse 8, and 6, verse 12. Listen, High Priest Joshua, you and your associates seated before you, who are men symbolic of things to come. I am going to bring my servant, the branch. Zechariah 3, verse 8. Tell him this is what the Lord Almighty says. Here is the man whose name is the branch, and he will branch out from his place and build the temple of the Lord. Zechariah 6, verse 12. Benjamin Roden would pass away in 1978, but not before naming a successor to his heavenly flock, his wife Lois. It wasn't this, but the arrival of a strangely charismatic, awkward guitar-playing Jesus freak with long hair that would turn the group on its head and set it on a collision course with destruction. This young man's name was Vernon Howell, and he came to do the Lord's work. 6:31 a.m. The entire compound is gassed. 6:47 a.m. The FBI hostage rescue team then fires what they claim were, quote, plastic, non-incendiary tear gas rounds through the windows. They claimed this fact for 6 years, even during congressional inquiries and investigations post-siege. In 1999, the FBI released a statement, quote, "We regret previous answers to Congress and to the public about the possible use of inflammatory devices. This may ultimately prove to be inaccurate," unquote. They maintain that the rounds in question never landed near the building and that, quote, "law enforcement did not start the fire," but the sudden shift in details and the covering up of relevant facts does leave one to wonder what else they might be inaccurate about. 7:23 a.m. FBI surveillance tapes record a Branch Davidian male saying, quote, "The fuel has to go all around to get started," and then a second male saying, "Well, there are 2 cans here if that's poured soon." 7:30 a.m. CEV-1 is deployed to the compound again, where it breaches the wall of the building and inserts more tear gas. At this time, the Branch Davidians open fire on the assault vehicle.
So yeah, Sean's like, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Yes, apparently the Lord works like a 5th grade bully and just pulls you out of bed and then gives you a wedgie, dumps your books, and runs your underwear up the flagpole. Apparently that is the mysterious ways we are speaking of. So pretty much the whole "we didn't fire incendiary things, oh wait, we actually did," is an interesting little nugget for you guys to remember. So yes, for years they said the gas canisters, the CS gas canisters that they fired into the compound were not incendiary, because of course that was one of the first things that people said was like, oh, well, if one of those tear gas canisters hit the fuel that had been poured around, that's going to start a fire. Those are basically explosives. And they are. So they were like, no, they were just plastic and they're not incendiary, so they should not have started anything. Well, come to find out, 6 years after the fact, that they were like, yeah, that thing we said about it being non-incendiary and like they wouldn't catch fire, yeah, they would probably catch fire. So like, and it literally like blipped the radar and was like forgotten. Like nobody mentions it. Nobody really talks about it. Nobody brings it up. One of those things that like the government does, or like politicians get to do. And then walk it back later. And just, this is politics in general. I'm not taking sides, but I'm just saying it's like, I feel like there's people in certain positions of power that get away with these certain kinds of things where they can go, we didn't do that. And then like, nah, actually we did do that. And then nothing happens. So the Lord did it. He did it. He did it in his mysterious ways of being a bully. And then he gave you a purple nurple and an arm twister, and then said, are you going to cry? Are you going to cry? Are you going to cry? Stop crying. Why are you hitting yourself? That is pretty much, apparently, well, the Old Testament, basically, the Old Testament God worked pretty much like an elementary school bully. So it would not have surprised me had he not just given Moses a noogie and just been like, why'd you drop those commandments? Why'd you do that? Like, would not have shocked me at all. Anyways, sidetrack. Segue. Continue me.
Vernon Howell, the man the world would come to know as David Koresh, was born on August 17, 1959, in Houston, Texas, to a 14-year-old single mother, Bonnie Sue Clark. Koresh's father, Bobby Wayne Howell, abandoned the family before Vernon was born, running off with another teenage girl, leaving Bonnie Sue on her own. She then moved in with her new boyfriend, a violent alcoholic. After years of abuse, Bonnie Sue left the relationship with her then 4-year-old son and left young Vernon in the care of her mother, Earlene Clark. Koresh's mother would return when he was 7 after marrying a carpenter named Roy Haldeman, with whom she would have a son, Roger, in 1966.
Had to unmute myself. So, hello, people that are just joining. Hello, hello, hello. And I forgot the hellos at the beginning, so rude of me. Hi to, let me see if I can get everyone. Hello to Conry, Max, Electric Pagan, Linda, Mina, Tamra, Patrick, Crow of Judas, Conry, Dontex. I think I almost got Cassie. I almost forgot. I didn't. I think I got everybody, maybe. I don't know. Sean. I almost got everyone. So anyways, so hellos are out of the way. So you saw his mom in a previous slide. So that was David Koresh's mother. And she was, and DJ, sorry, I forgot DJ. She had him obviously at a very young age. So she was obviously still alive during the whole incident that did end up happening in Waco. And David Koresh did phone her from the compound while the FBI raid was happening. And he called his mother to tell her basically that I'm going to die and it's too bad you didn't listen to my prophecies or whatever. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And then, pretty much was that. So fun, I guess it's not fun, but like interesting true crime segue side note. So David Koresh's mother, who then went on to write a book about the incident and all of that, was actually stabbed to death and murdered in 2009. She was a nurse at the time and had gone to her older sister's home in order to take her to a doctor's appointment. And then there was a call to the authorities, and nobody really knows what happened, what occurred in the house. All they know is that when the authorities got there, it was just the two women in the house, the older sister and Bonnie Sue Haldeman, and a knife was at the scene. So they really don't know what had occurred between the two of them, if they'd had an argument. The older sister, I guess, according to her daughter, had always kind of suffered from mental health issues. So really don't know what happened there. But yeah, it was like, it's a weird, like little, again, extra true crime kind of like segue of, yep, David Koresh's mother was murdered by her sister. So there's that. Continue me.
Koresh himself described his early childhood as lonely, and that he had trouble in school due to his poor study habits and dyslexia. He was put in remedial and special classes where he was mocked and called Vernie by his peers. He would drop out of high school in his junior year. In what proved to be a troubling pattern of sexual assault and exploitation of minors, he would get a 15-year-old girl pregnant when he was 19, a clear case of statutory rape. He then claimed to be reborn as a born-again Christian and joined his mother's denomination, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was in this congregation that he would find himself infatuated with the minister's daughter, and while praying for guidance, claimed he opened his eyes and allegedly found the Bible he was holding open to Isaiah 34:16, which stated, quote, "None should want for her mate," unquote. Convinced that this was a divine message from God, Koresh approached the pastor and told him that God wanted him to have his daughter for his wife. The pastor did what any concerned parent would do and immediately threw Koresh out. But this didn't seem to deter him, and he was only finally expelled from the congregation when he persisted in his pursuit of the young lady.
That is a face only a mother could love right there. Isn't that a face that says 1980s like computer programmer? Like he wants to talk to you about the software he just programmed and designed. Like he literally looks like he's going to pin you down at the bar and be like, "I want to tell you about this new software, this new solitaire game that I just made." Like, no. Oh yeah, the mullet, business in the front, party in the back. Apparently the official hairstyle of crazy cultists everywhere. Cheers to that. This is gross, but I'm drinking it anyway. I've made my bed and I'm going to lie in it. Yeah, Bill Gates is a crackhead, but kind of a little bit. Yeah, like, I mean, he literally looks like somebody that would like talk your head off for the entire date about how they're into crypto coin. 100%. like no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade, but like, oh yeah, he had a Casio watch for sure. He had the Casio calculator watch. I don't deny this at all. Yeah. Do you have a time to talk about our Lord and Savior, IBM? Yeah. Confusing. Anyways, so yeah, that whole story, like obviously that continued throughout his life. He did have a really gross and unfortunate attraction to underage girls. So I am not a big fan of David Koresh by any means for a lot of reasons. That is only one of them. But yeah, it's like, I mean, honestly, like, see, he does look like a piece of shit. Like, what would you do? Like, this man, look at this man, look at this face right here. I want you to look at it. I want you to study it. I want you to know it intimately. And this man walks up to you and goes, "I want to marry your daughter." Like, would you not have just seriously, like, socked him right in the taint? Like, Godzilla uppercut to the tweenus. Nope, sir. He's lucky that all that happened was he got thrown out. He is lucky. This was in Texas. I'm surprised he didn't get shot. Like, it's like, "I just want to take your daughter out for spaghetti." Like, no, goodbye, sir. No. Like, I can't, and he should never. And okay, continue me.
Looking for a new holy ground and a group to call his own, he moved to Waco, Texas in 1981 and joined the Branch Davidians. Koresh would play guitar and sing in the services at the Mount Carmel Center, but the man who had become the self-proclaimed sinful Messiah was not content to simply sing in the choir. He wanted to be the head of it. He wanted to be the head of everything. And he knew just how to do it. 7:48 a.m. On the tapes of FBI agents recorded during the siege, one of the hostage rescue team agents requests permission to fire military-style tear gas shells in order to break through an underground concrete bunker. He is granted permission and fires 2 shells. 7:58 a.m. CEV-2, equipped with a battering ram, rips a hole into the second floor of the compound. Moments later, another hole is punched in the rear of one of the buildings of the compound. At this time, the vehicles withdraw. 8:08 a.m. 3 military-grade pyrotechnic tear gas rounds are fired at the concrete construction pit, not the bunker, in order to try and breach it. The ordnance is fired downwind and away from the main quarters, but the shells bounce off. An agent inside the CEV reports that one shell did indeed strike the bunker, but bounced off and did not penetrate it. 9:00 a.m. The Branch Davidians unfurl a large banner that reads, quote, "We want our phone fixed." This would imply that at this time, for the first time during the siege, there is no direct communication to Koresh or any of the Branch Davidians inside the compound. David Koresh believed he was a prophet, and it didn't take long for the young man with a fiery tongue and prophetic visions to ingratiate himself into the good graces of Branch Davidian leader Lois Roden herself. Some even claim that there was a much more base reason for such favoritism. David Thibodeau, in his book, A Place Called Waco, insinuated that David Koresh began a sexual affair with Lois Roden at this time, who was then in her late 60s. Eventually, Koresh started to claim that God had chosen him to father a child with Lois, who would become the chosen one.
I sincerely hope that I speak for everyone in the chat when I say, no, okay. No to all of that. No to all of that. Like, and apparently I heard, according to, and this could be here or there, and neither one of, I don't know if it's accurate, but apparently this did happen, and she had a miscarriage, I guess, at that age. So he was just like, dude, if I can get her pregnant, fucking sky's the limit. Like, I can't. I don't want to. I need the screaming pillow. So anyone that has a screaming pillow now would be a good time. Now would be a good time for the scream. Only dreams now. Only dreams. Okay. So let's go back to it. Ugh. I can't. Still can taste it. Oh, God.
In 1983, Lois Roden allowed Koresh to begin to teach his own doctrine, called the Serpent's Rod, which caused some controversy inside the group. See, David Koresh wasn't the only one who had his eye on the leadership of the Branch Davidians. It turned out that Lois Roden's son, George, also known as the Madman of Waco for reasons which momentarily will become abundantly clear, felt that he should be the next rightful leader of the group, and considered Koresh an interloper. A period of calm would ensue at the compound, but the peace would not last long. A fire would break out, destroying $500,000 worth of property and an administration building. George Roden accused Koresh of starting the fire, but David Koresh countered with the argument that, quote, "No man set that fire," and that it was a judgment from God, and that God was apparently none too happy with George's interference with David Koresh's divine plan. Roden, who claimed to have the backing of a majority of the group's followers after his mother's death in 1986, had enough of David Koresh and forced him, as well as his small group of about 25 followers, off the Mount Carmel property at gunpoint. Banished from their promised land, the group took to living rough in a small commune of tents and buses outside of Palestine, Texas for the next 2 years. It was a hard-scrabble existence, but Koresh enjoyed the loyalty of a majority of the Branch Davidian community.
Okay, we're not even going to talk about this majestic hairdo right here. But yeah, I see the chat popping up with a mullet challenge. All right, well, let's do it. I saw somebody accept the mullet challenge. So if you guys want to contribute to the mullet challenge, the first person that, what was it? What are we doing? Like, donates $100. Donate $100 and he'll grow or donate Dogecoin or cryptocurrency. Come on. Let's bring this mullet challenge into fruition. Hashtag mullet challenge. Patrick, are you down? Are we doing this? What's going on? I mean, I feel like this hairstyle, sorry, I keep doing the reverse thing. This here, he's like, yeah, I'm just going to dip out of the chat now. He's like, goodbye. this hairstyle here, I mean, that's just as 80s majesty, very much so. Looks like something at a Sears portrait studio. Just need that little weird painted blue background that everybody had back then. So yeah, donate to grow a mullet for $100, then agree to cut over $300. Wow, you are getting priced out, sir. So yeah, he's like, I have to leave now. So yeah, also the glasses, dude. The glasses, I don't know. The aviators. There's something to be said about a pair of aviators that it's like okay, like they look okay. Like I like that they kind of came back and did the whole vintage thing, but like when you see them like in this context, then you go, ooh no, or perm. You guys are just mean. Now this is just mean spirited at this point. Is this cyberbullying? I feel like this is cyberbullying at this point. OMG. That is some 80s shit. Yep. Fuck yeah. You need the windbreaker, the members only jacket to go with it too. Like straight up. Mullet, members only jacket, Casio watch. I'm gonna do this right. Oh, and a color. Oh, a rat tail. We got to do a rat tail. Who all in favor of a rat tail? Show of emojis. Who's in favor of a rat tail? Please. I can't. Anyways. Oh God, this is gross. This is what happens when I run out of booze. Totally. Yeah, let's continue. I don't even know where I'm at this point. Members only jacket. Heck yeah. These things are the shit. So many emojis. Rat tail it is. Continue. Oh, Lord. I hate when I do that, when like the thing skips and, oh, we went a little too far. Let's go back. All right, we're about right there. We might backtrack a little bit. Sorry, guys.
Roden, who claimed to have the backing of a majority of the group's followers after his mother's death in 1986, had enough of David Koresh and forced him, as well as his small group of about 25 followers, off the Mount Carmel property at gunpoint. Banished from their promised land, the group took to living rough in a small commune of tents and buses outside of Palestine, Texas for the next 2 years. It was a hard-scrabble existence, but Koresh enjoyed the loyalty of a majority of the Branch Davidian community. Though the group wondered if they'd ever be able to return to their Mount Carmel home while it was under the control of George Roden, it seemed nearly impossible. In the year following Lotus Roden's death, the conflict between the two prodigal sons only escalated, with George Roden disinterring a corpse from the community cemetery. Roden claimed that it was simply to move the cemetery as a whole, but Koresh contested that Roden had dug up the corpse to issue a resurrection challenge. In a strange necromantic spin on the King Arthur pulling the sword from the stone myth, Koresh said that Roden claimed that whomever could resurrect the body would become the new group leader.
Well, that segue did not take long for me to pop back into that. Yes, you guys heard that correctly. The madman of Waco, George Roden himself, decided to disinter a woman's corpse from the community cemetery at Mount Carmel and decided that she was going to be the lightning rod. Yes, she was going to be the stiff sword in the stone, as it were. Oh, no pun intended. Actually, all puns intended. That if you could bring this woman back to life, who'd been dead for, I don't know, she's dead, very much dead. If you could bring her back to life, then whoever can do that would be the new group leader. I did say that it would become very obvious as to why he was called the Madman of Waco. And that's not even the main reason. That's just a side reason. This is just an appetizer to the crazy buffet that is about to happen. So buckle up, buttercups. It gets only crazier from here.
Koresh went to the authorities to file charges on Roden for illegally exhuming a corpse, but was told that he would need to provide proof, for example, photos of the body, before appropriate action could be taken. David Koresh would seize on the opportunity to remove his rival once and for all, and returned to the Mount Carmel compound with 7 followers in order to get proof of the exhumation. However, the group's trespass was discovered by Roden, and a gunfight broke out. By the time the sheriff arrived to put an end to the incident, Roden had already suffered a serious gunshot wound and was pinned down behind a tree. Koresh and his followers were summarily arrested and charged with attempted murder. At the trial, Koresh simply explained that he and his followers had only returned to the compound in order to collect evidence of criminal abuse of a corpse, and that Roden had attacked them first. Ultimately, all the followers were acquitted, and a mistrial was declared in Koresh's case. 9:13 a.m. CEV-1 breaks through the front door of the compound to deliver more tear gas. 9:20 a.m. FBI surveillance tapes record a meeting that had started at 7:30 between several unidentified male members of the Branch Davidian compound. The exchange is as follows. "They got 2 cans of Coleman fuel down there, huh?" "Empty." "All of it?" "Nothing left." 10 o'clock a.m. A man is seen waving a white flag on the southeast side of the compound. He is advised at this time over the loudspeakers that if he or others are surrendering, to come out. He does not. At the same time, another man comes out of what remains of the front door to retrieve the phone and the phone line. 11:30 a.m. CEV-2 has mechanical difficulties with a broken tread, but its replacement breaches the backside of the compound. David Koresh and his new loyal following wouldn't have to be concerned with the madman of Waco for much longer, though. In 1989, George Roden attacked and killed Wayman Dale Adair with an axe blow to the skull, after the latter claimed to be the true Messiah. Roden was declared insane by the courts and confined to a psychiatric hospital.
And there it is. There is the center of the shrubbery maze. He killed a man by hitting him in the head with an axe because he claimed to be the Messiah. Wow. And here's the thing. Apparently, David Koresh was the lesser of 2 crazy evils at this point. I don't even know how that's mathematically possible. Like, in what kind of program? What kind of program? I don't know. Yes, Janine, I did. Thank you to Janine and to Linda who donated through PayPal. You guys are awesome. You guys are amazing. Rock stars. Love you. But yeah, like when you're a cult leader and somehow you are the less crazy one, you were the better option. Things have taken a turn. I can't. They should never. Continue me.
The group, meanwhile, had managed to raise enough money to pay off the back taxes on the Mount Carmel property and take it back over. It was the end of the rivalry with Roden, who continued to harangue Koresh at every turn by filing legal claims and lawsuits even while imprisoned. But something had changed. There had been a tipping point that had occurred during this contentious back and forth that, in at least David Koresh's mind, had sealed his fate and destiny as the ultimate leader of the Branch Davidians, as well as a true prophet of God. During the time of their banishment from Mount Carmel, David Koresh had been a busy man. He spent this time recruiting new international followers from all over the world, but he also traveled himself. He went to Israel, where he claimed to have had a vision of himself as the modern-day Cyrus the Great, a Persian king who had freed the Jews while they were in Babylonian captivity during the times of the Old Testament. He would legally change his name from Vernon Howell to David Koresh at this time, Koresh being the Hebrew version of Cyrus, and David for King David, symbolizing his spiritual lineage, the line from which the new Messiah would descend. By taking on this name, he was, quote, professing himself to be the spiritual descendant of King David, a messianic figure carrying out a divinely commissioned errand, unquote. That errand increasingly became focused on passages in the book of Revelations that spoke of the 7 seals. The opening of these seals was to portend the second coming of Christ and the end of days. A figure called the Lamb, or the Lamb of God, was the only one capable of opening these sacred seals. The first four released each of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The fifth released the cries of the martyrs. The sixth heralded earthquakes and other natural disasters, while the seventh and final seal represents the ultimate end of the world. And David Koresh, in his obsession with prophecy and prophetic visions, increasingly grew to believe that he was the foretold Lamb, whose task was opening the seals to usher in the second coming. He also began to believe that the beast of Babylon, the symbol of ultimate evil that must be defeated for man to achieve salvation, was not Satan or the devil, but the United States government itself.
Because that tracks, right? That totally tracks. Lamb of, yeah, unfortunately, Jeannie, not the cool Lamb of God, not the band. When I was image searching, I forgot to put like Bible in there or like biblical, and I just typed in Lamb of God. I wasn't even thinking about it, and it just brought up images of the band, and I was like, oh wait, no, not that one, wrong one. That's the cooler one. That's the better option. Although, to be fair, in the Book of Revelations, the Lamb of God also has like 7 eyes and a crown or some shit. I don't know. The whole thing was a fucking acid trip. It was basically Adventure Time in biblical days. Like, I was hooked on the weird because it was nothing but from start to finish. 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Strawlip riding a beast, like it, things made of gems. Wild. It's wild. If you've not read it, I recommend reading it at least one time through start to finish, just to try to like, whatever this person was taking when they wrote it, I would like some if they are not extinct. Because they might be. Because I think he took them all at the same time. Let's continue, shall we? Ugh, I have to keep drinking this thing. Blech.
This idea had echoed back to the group's founder, Victor Hotef, who thought that the new Davidic kingdom would be in Palestine, and even Koresh himself thought this until his vision. Until then, he was convinced that his martyrdom, as all prophets must be martyrs, would be in Jerusalem. After this, he was convinced that the prophecies of Daniel would be fulfilled in Waco, as the Mount Carmel compound, not Jerusalem, was in fact the new Davidic kingdom. And this was where David Koresh was also convinced that he would ultimately die. On February 27, 1993, it all began to unravel. The Waco Herald-Tribune began publishing a series of articles by Mark England and Darlene McCormick. This sensational piece, called The Sinful Messiah, was named after a claim that Koresh himself made of how the next Messiah that would come save the world would not be sinless, as Christ had been, but would have to understand all of man's failings and sins in order to save him from himself. The articles reported multiple allegations that Koresh had physically abused children in the compound and had committed statutory rape by taking multiple underage brides. Koresh was also said to advocate polygamy for himself and declared himself married to several female residents of the small community. The paper claimed that Koresh had announced that he was entitled to at least 140 wives, and that he was also entitled to claim any of the women in the group as his.
I don't even know 140 people, much less 140 men. I can't get a text back. And this motherfucker decided that he should have 140 wives. Why? So the woman in that picture and the woman in the previous picture is Rachel Koresh, which was his actual legal wife. The other ones obviously were like bigamous relationships, right? Like, so you can't marry more than one person because it's kind of illegal. So she was his actual legal wife whom he had children with. But he also had like 12 children total with different women in the compound. A fact I will get into again that ties to prophecy and something ballyhoo in the Bible that I will get into momentarily. But the whole polygamy for him is an important note because he was the only one in the group that was allowed to have multiple wives. In fact, the other men in the group were actually all divorced from their wives. Like their marriages were dissolved at Koresh's command. And he married the women. Like, he stepped in and married them all. And the men were actually forced to live in a like single man, like little like housing, like barracks, basically. Like, all the men had to live there. And he got all the women, but nobody else got any. So big key component of a cult where like, I can have things and I can make rules and none of you have anything, you don't have any say, and I can do shit and you can't. And you can't say anything about it either. So again, big cult red flag there, as if there weren't already. This is basically the factory where they make red flags at this point. Yeah, all the cult leaders think they deserve all the women. I was like, dude, like, okay. Mm-hmm. And then women like went with it. They were like, yep, no, I willingly went with him. I'm like, you willingly went with Bill Gates's nerdy younger brother because he said he could hear God or something. All right, pop off, sis. Like, I don't know. But yeah, we'll get into why he thought that he needed a bunch of wives. Well, just because he was gross. That was a big reason. He was a dirtbag. Big reason. But there was a reason behind it. Whatever could it be? Is it anything that makes sense? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Continue.
That he had fathered at least a dozen children, and that some of these mothers became brides as young as 12 or 13 years old. This was based in Koresh's own doctrine called the House of David. This doctrine based around a reported revelation that involved the conception of 24 children by selected women in the Branch Davidian community. These 24 children were to serve as the ruling elders reflected in Revelations 4 verse 4 over the millennium after Christ's ultimate return. In addition to allegations of sexual abuse and misconduct, Koresh and his followers were suspected of stockpiling illegal weapons. In May 1992, Chief Deputy Daniel Weinberg of the McLennan County Sheriff's Department called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to notify them that his office had been contacted by a local UPS representative concerned about a report from a local driver. The UPS driver said that a package had broken open on delivery to the Branch Davidian residence, revealing firearms, empty grenade casings, and black powder. An undercover ATF agent was sent into the compound, and he confirmed the presence of a large cache of weapons on the site. On June 9th, the ATF opened a formal investigation. 11:27 to 12:04 p.m. According to the government, a series of remarks such as, "I want a fire," "keep that fire going," and "do you think I could light this soon," indicate that the Branch Davidians have started setting fire to the complex around 11:30. Surviving Branch Davidians testified that Coleman fuel had been poured, and fire experts in another report agreed, quote, "without question," that people inside the complex had started multiple accelerated fires. 11:43 a.m. Another tear gas insertion takes place. The armored vehicle moves well into the building on the right rear side in order to reach the concrete room, where the FBI hostage rescue team believes the Branch Davidians are hiding in order to avoid the gas. 11:45 a.m. The wall on the right rear side of the building collapses. 12:03 p.m. An armored vehicle turret knocks away the first floor corner on the right side. On July 30th, ATF agents David Aguilera and James Skinner visited the Branch Davidians' gun dealer, Henry McMahon, who tried to get the agents to speak with David Koresh on the phone. Koresh offered to allow the ATF to inspect the Branch Davidians' weapons and paperwork for said weapons. He asked to speak with Aguilera, but Aguilera declined. The ATF then obtained a search and arrest warrant for David Koresh and specific followers at the Mount Carmel compound, on the grounds that they believed the Davidians were modifying their weapons illegally to give them fully automatic capabilities. There were also claims, which remain unsubstantiated, that a meth lab was also being run out of the compound. And although the investigation by the ATF, quote, focused on firearm violations, not illegal drugs, the ATF nevertheless requested assistance from both the DEA and the DoD, quote, citing a drug connection. These claims of a drug connection were based on 5 pieces of circumstantial evidence. Number 1. a recent delivery to the compound of, quote, chemicals, instruments, and glassware. Number 2, written testimony from a former compound resident who claimed that Koresh told him that, quote, drug trafficking was a desirable way to raise money, unquote. Number 3, several current compound residents who, quote, had prior drug involvement. Number 4, 2 former residents who were imprisoned for drug trafficking. And number 5, National Guard's overflights with thermal cameras that showed a hot spot inside the compound, quote, possibly indicating a methamphetamine laboratory. The ATF wanted to arrest Koresh outside of the compound, but planners of the raid received inaccurate information that he rarely left it. In fact, Koresh and other Branch Davidian members were well known throughout the local community and left the compound often. The Branch Davidians partly supported themselves by trading at gun shows and took care to have the relevant paperwork to ensure their transactions were legal. In fact, Branch Davidian Paul Fata was a federally licensed firearms dealer, and the group operated a retail gun business called the Mag Bag. When shipments for the Mag Bag arrived, they were signed for by Fata, Steve Schneider, or Koresh. The morning of the raid, Paul Fata and his son Kalani were on their way to a gun show in Austin to conduct business.
Oops, sorry me. So the funny thing about the whole meth thing and trying to get the DEA involved, yeah, there was no meth lab in the compound. There was no trace of any meth or any materials for a meth lab found in the compound ever, even when it burned. They found nothing. As a matter of fact, rewinding back to when they took the Mount Carmel compound back over from George Roden after he was imprisoned for brutally murdering a guy with an axe to the forehead. When they took the compound back over, he owed a whole bunch of back taxes on it. So the Branch Davidians paid off the back taxes. As a matter of fact, and one of the renters that George Roden had been leasing out part of the compound to had built a meth lab inside of the Mount Carmel compound before the Branch Davidians came back in. And David Koresh himself and the Branch Davidians reported the meth lab to the authorities and had them come clean it out. So there was a meth lab there at one point, but it was way before any of this. And as a matter of fact, it was reported and dismantled. So nothing was ever really proven as far as a drug tie-in. They did have a fuck ton of weapons, though. A fuck ton. But no drugs were ever found. And no surviving members even talk about anything about drugs. Like, it's never even, like, mentioned. You would think it's somebody at this point would say, like, yeah, I saw them making this one time. They were like, I never saw any of that. So the interesting other side note of this was that basically at this time, the ATF was looking to, they were getting ready to do their budget hearings, which in the United States, when you have to go before Congress, you have to pitch your case for like why you need more money, like why your agency needs more money. And it was around this time that the ATF was supposed to do that. So there are theories behind this that say basically this whole raid was pretty much a performative show to say, look at what we can do when we're properly funded. And they went in with this whole operation. It was basically supposed to be like, this is going to be nothing. We're going to stampede in there. We're going to make them do the perp walk out the door, and it's going to be done by lunch. It didn't turn out that way. So let's find out what happened.
Additionally, there was no evidence ever found of illegal drugs being produced or sold at the compound. So while the reasoning behind the initial ATF raid may have been shaky, it was the execution of it that would really come into sharp focus for the way that it quickly went wrong. The search warrant was executed on February 28, 1993, and the local sheriff, interviewed after the incident, claimed he was never apprised of the raid. Any advantage of surprise was lost when a local TV reporter who had been tipped off about the raid asked for directions to the Mount Carmel compound from a mail carrier who was coincidentally also Koresh's brother-in-law. Despite being informed that the Branch Davidians knew a raid was coming, the ATF commander ordered that it go ahead anyway, even though their plan hinged heavily on the element of surprise. It was crucial to the plan that the Branch Davidians be unaware of the raid and therefore unprepared. Critics of the ATF's actions claimed that due to the operation being so critically compromised, it should have been called off. But it was not. Strangely also, while not standard procedure, ATF agents had their blood types written on their arms or neck after leaving the staging area before the raid, because it was recommended by the military to facilitate speedy blood transfusions in the case of injury. Koresh then told undercover ATF agent Robert Rodriguez that they knew a raid was imminent. Rodriguez had infiltrated the Branch Davidians and was astonished to find that his cover had been blown. The agent made an excuse and left the compound. When asked later what the Branch Davidians had been doing when he left the compound, Rodriguez replied, quote, "They were praying." Branch Davidian survivors have written that Koresh then ordered selected male followers to begin arming and taking up defensive positions, while the women and children were told to take cover in their rooms. Koresh told them he would try to speak to the agents, and what happened next would depend on the agents' intentions. The ATF arrived at 9:45 a.m. in a convoy of civilian vehicles containing uniformed personnel in armored SWAT tactical gear.
So, again, tying into this was just a whole messy fuck up from top to bottom. This is like if somebody wrote a book on this is a way not to do a raid on a compound, it would be this. Because basically the whole plan of infiltrating the compound and going in and getting them out hinged on the Branch Davidians not knowing that the federal agents were coming. The cover was blown. They found out, obviously, from the mailman, told them, and they knew they were on to the plan. But instead of calling it off, they went ahead and decided to go for it anyway. Mistake number one. Mistake number two was now they have time to prepare. They have time to get their weapons. They have time to arm themselves. So obviously this is not going to go in a good, like, calm and peaceful way. I really don't think you're going to be able to talk somebody down at this point. So yeah, it's like this looks normal. Exactly, Indy. He was like, like, exactly, Mom. But then it was just a mess from top to bottom. They roll up in SWAT gear already, still ready, ready to go, ready to drag these people out. And obviously they're armed now and they have weapons, and I don't think they're going to go down with it. They're not going to come out because you asked them nicely at this point. Also, side note, the misinformation that the federal agents got about David Koresh, because they claimed, the press called them out even on it on several occasions and said, well, we've heard accounts that say that he goes into town quite frequently. And he did. He was there at least once a week in town, either at a restaurant or he was doing gardening work at a community college in Waco. They could have arrested him by himself when he was doing any of those things. And because they had the wrong information that basically said he never leaves the compound, they decided to take out the whole compound. This is why information and communication is so very fucking important. Continue.
The stories diverge from this point into two perspectives, that of the agents present at the raid and those of the surviving members of the group. While many of the following incidents are agreed on and documented that they did, in fact, happen, how they exactly played out is where the conflicts in the accounts begin to occur. ATF agents stated that they heard shots coming from within the compound, while Branch Davidian survivors claimed that the first shots came from the ATF agents outside. A suggested reason may have been an accidental discharge of a weapon, possibly by an ATF agent, causing the ATF to respond with fire from automatic weapons. Other reports claim the first shots were fired by the ATF, quote, dog team, sent in to kill the dogs at the Branch Davidian kennel. 3 helicopters from the National Guard were used as an aerial distraction and all took incoming fire. During the first shots, Koresh himself was wounded, shot in the hand and in the stomach. Within a minute of the raid's start, Branch Davidian Wayne Martin called emergency services, pleading for them to stop shooting. Martin asked for a ceasefire, and audio tapes record him saying, quote, "Here they come again," and, quote, "That's them shooting, that's not us," unquote.
So yes, that did actually happen. The Branch Davidians did have a kennel of dogs at the compound, and those were some of the first shots fired, according to the Branch Davidians, were the ATF agents shooting the dogs in the kennel. I'm just reporting the details, guys. I don't like it any more than you do. This is a whole bunch of fucked up on both sides. Like, neither side was great. Both sides were obviously did shit wrong. So yeah, like, Amina's like, that goes too far. It does. These were just 100% bust the door down guerrilla tactics. And here's the thing. They also did not take into account that you are dealing with a group that has for years, as a matter of fact, because Branch Davidians are a member of the Seventh-day Adventists, and they fully believe that the world is going to end and that Christ is going to come back. So you're basically reinforcing the apocalyptic vision that they have been preaching for years. As a matter of fact, for months and years before this, David Koresh was on his whole Seven Seals thing about the government, and he kept saying, they're going to come in here, they're going to come in here, they're going to shoot us, they're going to burn the place down. He even said, burn the place down. So the fact that then you do this and you show up and you reinforce everything he has said so far really doesn't help the whole, you're basically dealing with a group that's ready for the end times, and you're giving them all of the evidence that this is actually happening. You're basically making the end of the world play out in front of them. So it was just it was a mess. It was a mess. Just a 100% mess. 100%. Real bad. Oh, and this was months after. This was a year after Ruby Ridge, which was also a complete catastrophe fuck up. If you ever want to look that one up, that was another one. They were batting. They needed a W real bad in the column, the ATF and the FBI at this point, but this wasn't it, sis. This wasn't it. So yeah, let's continue. It doesn't even get any better. This didn't have to happen. Straight up.
Emergency personnel attempted to call through to the agents and authorities who were stationed outside the compound in order to broker some sort of break in the gunfire, but no one responded. 12:07 p.m. The first visible flames appear in two spots in the front of the building. First on the left of the front door, on the second floor, then a short time later on the right side of the building, and at a third spot on the back side. An FBI hostage rescue team member reported seeing a Branch Davidian member igniting a fire in the front door area. 12:09 p.m. Member Ruth Riddle exits with a floppy disk in her jacket containing Koresh's manuscript on the Seven Seals. A third fire is detected on the first floor. 12:10 p.m. Flames spread quickly throughout the building, spurred on by high winds. The fire grows and spreads quickly. Shots continued to be fired back and forth by ATF agents and Branch Davidians for a total of 2 hours. At this time, Clive Doyle, a Branch Davidian member and witness to the raid, claimed that as the raid by federal agents began, he heard Koresh say, quote, "I want you all to go back to your rooms and stay calm," unquote. He continues, "I could hear David's steps going down the hall towards the front door. Then all of a sudden I hear David say, 'Hey, wait a minute, there are women and children in here.' Then all hell broke loose, just a barrage of shots from outside coming in. It sounded like a bloodbath." During the exchange, 4 ATF agents and 5 Branch Davidian members were killed, and more than 16 agents and an unknown number of cult members were wounded. Eventually, Sergeant Lynch of the McLennan County Sheriff's Department was able to contact the ATF and negotiated a ceasefire. Sheriff Harwell stated in a documentary produced 4 years after the siege, Waco, The Rules of Engagement, that the only reason the agents withdrew was because they ran out of ammunition. It seemed as if the group had come out the winners, but the battle was far from over. Because federal agents had been killed during the raid, the FBI then took over jurisdiction.
So also as a side note, in that documentary, which is called Waco, The Rules of Engagement, it was made in 1997, there were reporters. So this was all happening in front of reporters as well. You guys remember, you guys are mentioning in the feed, like watching it on television. So this was all happening in front of news media, papers, you know, obviously the internet really wasn't a thing at the time, but had it been, there would have been bloggers there. But this is happening in front of news cameras. So at one point, there was a team of reporters that actually said that the ATF agents called over to them and asked the reporters to call for an ambulance. Which is a little weird, that if you're getting ready to shoot people and you're expecting to take fire maybe, and obviously you've been shooting at each other for about 2 hours, nobody has called an ambulance at this point. Nobody has called emergency services. Well, turns out one or several of the Branch Davidians were from inside the compound on the phone with emergency services. You can hear the 911 calls in this documentary, and the 911 dispatcher is attempting to get through to the agents, to the front line, to the authorities at the front line, and they are not answering. So the whole thing was just miscommunicated, dropped the ball. Like, there's just so many instances of just how this went wrong. This was literally Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong fucking went wrong. I also remember watching this on television. Like, I remember watching this all the way up until the end. Like, all the way up until the end, which we're getting there too. Jeez. Did not go well.
At first, the Branch Davidians maintained a phone line and contact with the local news media, and Koresh himself even gave interviews. The FBI would ultimately cut off the group's contact to the outside world, and for the next 51 days, communication with those inside the Mount Carmel compound was via phone with a group of 25 different FBI negotiators. In the first few days of the siege, the FBI thought they made progress that pointed towards the group's ultimate surrender. They managed to negotiate a deal with Koresh that the Branch Davidians would leave the compound in exchange for a message recorded by David Koresh himself, being broadcast on national radio. The broadcast was made, but soon afterwards, Koresh seemed to have a change of heart and told the negotiators that God had told him to remain inside the building and, quote, wait. While Koresh remained steadfast in holding up inside the compound, federal negotiators managed to secure the release of 19 children, ranging in age from 5 months to 12 years old, without their parents. 98 people still remained inside the building. During the subsequent debriefing of the children by the FBI and the Texas Rangers, it was then that the allegations of physical and sexual abuse that occurred in the compound long before the siege was confirmed. It was this justification that was used by the FBI in pleading the case to then-President Bill Clinton and Attorney General Janet Reno as the reason for launching tear gas attacks to force the remaining Branch Davidian members out of the compound. During the course of the 51-day siege, the FBI sent a video camera to the Branch Davidians. In the videotape made by Koresh's followers, Koresh introduced his children and his multiple wives to the FBI negotiators, including several minors who claimed to have had babies fathered by Koresh. Several Branch Davidians also made statements in the video. On day 9, Monday, March 8th, the Branch Davidians sent out the videotape in order to show the FBI that there were no hostages, but that everyone was staying inside on their own free will. The negotiators' log showed that when the tape was reviewed, there was concern that the tapes released to the media would gain sympathy for Koresh and the Branch Davidians. The videos also showed the 23 children still inside the compound.
So sorry I had to pause on the black screen. Yes, he was a sick bastard. So obviously a just vile, disgusting human being who was basically a walking trash fire. But at the same time, you sent this tape in order for and I've seen some of the tapes, and a lot of them are David Koresh and his multiple wives and his children, and basically showing the children in the compound and the people that were still there. It was important to them to let the FBI know that, hey, he's not keeping us here. You really don't need a hostage team. We're all staying here because you're pointing guns at us and doing other things. So, but then to get the tapes back and to go, you know what, this paints us in a bad light. Like, we look like the bad guys here, and people might actually feel sorry for these people, so we're not going to show them. At the end of the day, they were still human beings who died in a fire. So that just didn't sit right with me when I was going over the like I said, he could die in a fire, like 100%. Like, if they could have burned that whole compound down and only killed David Koresh, fine. That is cap. That is totally okay. But the other people, I don't. Yeah, it was shitty. So there's that.
As the siege continued, Koresh negotiated for more time, allegedly so that he could write religious documents he needed to complete about his final visions and the 7 seals before surrendering. His conversations, which were heavy with confusing and convoluted biblical imagery, alienated the federal negotiators, who became increasingly frustrated with Koresh's inability or refusal to answer simple questions. Among themselves, the negotiation teams took to calling Koresh's words Bible babble. As the siege wore on, 2 factions developed within the FBI, one believing negotiation to be the answer, the other force. Increasingly aggressive techniques were used to try to force the Branch Davidians out. For instance, sleep deprivation and psychological warfare on the inhabitants through all-night broadcasts of recordings of jet planes, loud pop music, chanting, and the screams of rabbits being slaughtered. Outside the compound, 9 Bradley fighting vehicles carrying M651CS tear gas grenades and ferret rounds, and 5 M28 combat engineer vehicles, CEVs, from the Army began patrolling. The armored vehicles were used to destroy perimeter fencing and outbuildings, and crush cars belonging to the Branch Davidians. Armored vehicles repeatedly drove over the grave of Branch Davidian Peter Gent, despite protests by the Branch Davidians and the negotiators. 2 of the 3 water storage tanks on the roof of the main building had been damaged during the initial ATF raid, but eventually the FBI cut all power and water to the compound, forcing those inside to survive on rainwater and stockpiled MRE rations. Criticism was later leveled by Koresh's right-hand man Stephen Schneider's attorney, Jack Zimmerman, at the tactic of using sleep and peace-disrupting sound against the Branch Davidians. Quote, "The point was this. They were trying to have sleep disturbance, and they were trying to take someone that they viewed as unstable to start with, and they were trying to drive him crazy. And then they got mad because he does something that they think is irrational."
So, he's not wrong. You are dealing with an already unstable individual. And the fact that you are using psychological warfare to push them further over the edge, like, what did you think Endgame was here? The man already believes that he's Jesus and that the end of the world is coming. Like, what did you think was going to happen? And you're depriving him of sleep. And yeah, pelting them with noise. And running over graves and busting up buildings. Like, what? At what point did you not think he was just going to eventually go, like, fuck it, and end of days, bitches, and be out? Like, again, you're pushing madness closer to the edge of more madness. Like, do you still hear the lambs, Clarice? Are the lambs still screaming? It was a really bad Hannibal Lecter, but you know what? We're going to go with it.
Unquote. Despite the increasingly aggressive tactics, Koresh ordered a group of followers to leave. 11 people left and were arrested as material witnesses, with one person being charged with conspiracy to commit murder. The children's, however, willingness to stay with Koresh disturbed the negotiators, who were unprepared to work around the Branch Davidians' religious zeal. However, as the siege went on, the children were aware that an earlier group of children who had left with some women were immediately separated and the women arrested. During the siege, several scholars who studied apocalypticism in religious groups attempted to persuade the FBI that the siege tactics being used by government agents would only reinforce the impression within the Branch Davidians that they were part of a biblical, quote, end of days confrontation that had cosmic significance. This would likely increase the chances of a violent and deadly outcome. The religious scholars pointed out that the beliefs of the group may have appeared to be extreme, but to the Branch Davidians, their religious beliefs were deeply meaningful, and they were willing to die for them. Koresh's discussions with the negotiation team became increasingly difficult. According to the FBI, he proclaimed that he was the second coming of Christ, and that he had been commanded by his Father in heaven to remain in the compound. 1 week before the April 19th assault, FBI planners considered using snipers to kill David Koresh and possibly other key Branch Davidians. The FBI voiced concern that the Branch Davidians might commit mass suicide, as had happened in 1978 at Jonestown. Koresh had repeatedly denied any plans for mass suicide when confronted by negotiators during the standoff, and people leaving the compound had not seen any such preparation. But agents were getting frustrated with Koresh's perceived stall tactics, and being told that conditions were deteriorating inside the compound, decided to push for a final assault. This final assault began the morning of April 19th, 1993. 12:12 p.m. An emergency call is placed regarding the fire at the compound. 2 Waco Fire Department trucks are dispatched. Shortly after, the Belmead Fire Department also dispatches 2 trucks. 12:22 p.m. The Waco Fire Department trucks arrive at the federal checkpoint, where they are halted. They are not permitted to pass for a full 15 minutes. The Belmead trucks follow shortly after. 12:25 p.m. There is a large explosion on the left side of the compound. 12:30 p.m. Part of the roof collapses. Around this time, there are several more explosions, and witnesses report the sound of gunfire. The FBI hostage rescue team attributes this to stored live ammunition going off as a result of the fire. 12:43 p.m. According to fire department logs, the fire trucks finally arrive at the compound. 12:55 p.m. The fire begins to burn out. The entire compound is leveled. 9 cult members would leave as the compound at Mount Carmel was consumed by a hellish inferno, but they would be the only ones who made it out. 76 members of the Branch Davidians, including David Koresh, would perish in what some may argue was an ironic, self-fulfilled prophecy. 20 of the more than 70 casualties were children. When the bodies were eventually recovered, a numerous array of causes of death were found, from being crushed beneath collapsed concrete walls, to poisoning by burning tear gas, to gunshot wounds. At least 20 Branch Davidians were shot, including Koresh and 5 children under the age of 14. The medical examiner who performed the post-mortem examinations of the remains believed these deaths to be mercy killings, or self-inflicted by those trapped inside the burning building with no escape. Some accounts claim that one of Koresh's loyal lieutenants, Steve Schneider, shot Koresh after realizing he had been duped by a false prophet before turning the gun on himself, but this remains an unsubstantiated rumor to this day. Trials, hearings, and civil suits followed the tragedy for years. New tactical policies for such raids were introduced by the ATF and other law enforcement agencies, citing the disastrous occurrence at Waco specifically as how such a tactical operation can go wrong. But the fallout from the events tragically did not stop there. The Oklahoma City bombers, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, cited the siege at Waco as their motivation for the attack on the federal building, which coincided with the 2-year anniversary of the assault and killed nearly 170 people. Nothing remains of the compound buildings today other than concrete foundations, as the burned buildings were bulldozed 2 weeks after the siege ended. A small chapel built many years after the events at Waco stands on the site. David Koresh himself was buried at Memorial Park Cemetery in Tyler, Texas, in the Last Supper section. There are still Branch Davidians who survived the carnage at Waco who maintain to this day that David Koresh was a prophet who spoke God's word. But was he a madman or a Messiah? Perhaps this passage from Matthew 7:15 says it best. Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Can't get enough of the hive mind? Then join us next week for a new episode with a deep dive into going clear, abuse, fraud, and alien overlords in Scientology, A Million Years of Servitude.
And I have to unmute my mic. I'm right, just like that. I'm back. I didn't want to interrupt the end there because I was in a good flow. But yeah, there were a lot of aspects to that story. I keep shaking the fucking table. There's a lot of aspects to that story that were not told at the time. The narrative of the press at the time was that it was a crazy cult that basically got what was coming to them. That was pretty much the line from the major media and from the press. But there were so many other facets that didn't get told until years and years after the fact. And some of them are still in question to this day. Like kind of Sean said, where it was like, oh, hurry up and cover the evidence. It was like, yeah, it was weird that it was bulldozed 2 weeks after. Like, you didn't even want to like look in the ash. No? Okay. Thanks, guys. I'm so glad you liked this one. The editing was a lot. I really wanted to capture the timeline of the day of the fire accurately. So that's why we kind of did little breaks where we covered the timeline. We started off with how it started, how it ended. So I thought it kind of gave like a sense of urgency. It kind of gave like a real, like, it felt like you were there. It felt like, all of that. So use different music in this episode. Yes, I used some different music that was in my editing software. So I kind of played around with that a little bit, just trying to help with tone. It was great. Yeah, like it was great. Thank you. I was like, it was gray. What was gray? Tell me. Thank you for watching. Also, thank you to my partner in true crime, Patrick McQuarrie, who made the lovely logo that you see down there and the lovely thumbnail that y'all clicked on so nicely. Also, don't forget to click on the like button in the video and share it out to as many people as you want. As many people as will watch it. So there's it's a lot, you guys. There's quite a few documentaries on it. There's the Waco Rules of Engagement. There is a ABC like Dateline kind of documentary called like Waco Truth and Lies. I kind of not advise watching a lot of the YouTube ones because they can be kind of like a little bit like, not a lot of actual accurate research is done, and it's just more opinion pieces. There's also a show that has garnered quite a bit of controversy that's on Paramount Plus called Waco. That is a mini series starring Taylor Kitsch as David Koresh. And apparently people are kind of not a fan of it because it takes the no bad guy stance in the show where it basically paints neither side as the bad guy. So it doesn't paint the government as the villain. It does not paint the Branch Davidians as the villain, but it was kind of like very like shades of gray, like neither side was right 100%, neither side was wrong 100%. So it's this kind of middle ground that I guess people don't really care for because they want David Koresh to be more villainized than he actually is. I'm like, he did that himself. Like, bet. Like, he already did that. He did that. He did a good job of that on his fucking own. So I think people are a little like, it's revisionist and you're making him look like a good guy. I'm like, nobody's making him look like a good guy. Like, he was not that at all. I haven't watched the show, but I really don't think they're trying to make him look like a good guy either. So next week is the one I will probably get doxxed for. Remember this face? I will probably get kidnapped and murdered by aliens. Just throwing that out there. Yeah, there were a lot of mistakes. The famous phrase of mistakes were made. A lot of them. So Mistakes were made, but not by me. But next week is going to be Scientology. So that will be probably the second to last episode in the cults mini series that we have been doing. The final episode will be, of course, the Manson family, which will then draw us right back into the realm of straight true crime. And we can go from there. So do expect that one in a week or 2 weeks. We're going to do Scientology, and there's a lot. I'm going to try to keep it to one episode. Thank you guys for hanging out. This one was a little bit longer. Jared Leto, right? That man, I can't with that dude. He's the answer to the question that nobody asked, like literally. Like if a question that no one asked was in human form, Jared Leto. He's also he's honeydew. If this was a fruit salad, he's honeydew. He's the one that's like the +1 that nobody asked for, and there it is. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. Like I said, don't forget to share the video. Thank you so much for the people who donated to PayPal. The link is in the video description. You are more than welcome to click on that Linktree link to share it out, to go to PayPal, to go to the merch store. Don't forget, there's some cool designs on there. Also, side note, if anyone is interested, I'm thinking about making keychains for a very special, kind of inspired by the Haunted Site Social Club, hashtag, a VIP group for Murder Corner. If you guys want like clubbed keychains, like I can do that. I've been working on a design. I'm cooking something up, so stay tuned for that. But yes, just I never asked for you guys for anything other than to like and share and get the information out there. Tom Cruise, Tom, come out of the closet. I won't be angry. Katie won't be angry. Just come out of the closet, Tom. I'm not in here though. I'm not in here though. He is 100% in there. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful evening. And as always, don't join a cult and don't get murdered, and stay spooky. Have a good evening.